Hello and welcome to part 3 of being a singing teacher. Hopefully you've watched part 1 and 2 so that this one makes sense and also you just have a better foundation in order to understand what's required. So in this video I'm going to cover what a singing teacher should ideally know and understand in order to be a great singing teacher. So let's face it, singing teaching is not a regulated industry. Anybody, literally anybody, could go out and set up a studio, practice and start teaching. There's no one that's going to come along and check their credentials or experience, but I'm hoping and I'm expecting, if you've been watching these videos, that you're the sort of person that actually wants to make sure that you're working and teaching in a safe and efficient manner. And so whilst it isn't regulated right now, the more knowledge and qualifications and experience that you have, the better you're going to be able to serve your students. The better you serve your students, the more abundant your business is going to be. And isn't that what we're looking for? Okay, so I really think that knowledge is power. And I also believe that accountability is valued. When your students know that you're really making sure that you're educating yourself and that you're teaching with good knowledge, they will appreciate it. And it also means that you can charge more. And of course, it's very stimulating to learn more. There's so much out there that we don't know about voice, and I find it really exciting. So let's delve into the kind of areas that I think are important that a singing teacher should know and understand in order to teach well. So the first area doesn't have to be in sequential order, by the way. There's no particular sequence to this, but the first area that I'm going to talk about is anatomy and physiology. And when I'm talking about anatomy and physiology, I'm talking about it in terms of function. So how does it function normally? And how does it function under conditions of singing? And in particular interest for voice, we have the larynx, the vocal folds, and the respiratory system. So these are all going to make up the instrument, and knowing and understanding how these particular bits of anatomy work and how they come together and what affects what is going to really help you understand how to make a diagnosis and an assessment on a voice, and then how to actually address the issues that you hear. So the next area is voice production and its key components. So the power, the source, and the filter. Power will be the air, the source will be the vibrating vocal folds where the beginning of sound is made and also where pitch is created, and the filter will be the resonance chamber, which then forms the vowels and the consonants that then gets issued out of the mouth, which in turn becomes the lyric. We also want to know how to assess these areas. We want to know how to assess and correct if someone's got intonation problems. Is that person singing off pitch because they can't hear it and they're disorientated in pitch? Or is it because there's something functional going on that's impacting the pitch? And knowing the difference will mean that you'll be able to correct them more effectively and more quickly. We're going to want to know, is that larynx stable? Does the singer have control over the larynx and the vocal folds and their breath management? Because all of these components are really important part of singing. Then we want to be able to correct and assess someone's tone. If it's very nasal or very breathy, what do we do in order to counteract that? Is someone singing with a healthy vibrato? And also not just healthy, but is it appropriate in that setting? If we get lots of vibrato in rock, not really that appropriate, whereas we would expect vibrato in classical and in some musical theatre, not all, by the way, and also in jazz and some pop and gospel and R&B. Vibrato would be present. And if it's present, is it a good vibrato or is it a big wobbly or bleaty vibrato? Then we want to be able to assess and correct someone as they're singing through their transition. This is an area that we work on a lot in singing teaching. A lot of people struggle to get from their lower end, so some people call that chest voice or chest register, through the middle into their upper end or the head voice or head register. So how do we help people do that? There's got to be a transition between one set of muscles and another set of muscles through the bridge area or the transition or passaggio. And how do we then assess what's going on? If somebody's cracking or breaking at that point, is it because there's too much air or too much muscle? Is it because their larynx is coming up, or is it because their vocal folds are closing in such an extreme way that it's causing a problem? And then, does the singer have control over their dynamics, and what kind of issues are their posture creating? Are they slouching, and is their neck coming forward, or are they hanging down over an instrument, or are they sitting as they're singing? What is their posture doing, and how is it supporting or hindering the singing? And then, of course, also included is musicality and performance. So how do we assess that? How do we help somebody? How do we make sure that they're not only just singing really well, but they're singing in the right key, and that they're singing in time, and that their phrasing is appropriate, and all those kind of musical things. And then when it comes to performance, in particular when we're working with contemporary singers, what's going on with the microphone? Do they know how to use that well, or do they need to sing more acoustically? Are they supposed to be acting as they sing and perform, or are they supposed to be dancing as well? All of these kind of things will have an impact. Of course, we need to also know how to teach. So we've got our tools of the trade, and in BAST we talk about the consonant, the vowel, the scale, the instruction, and the demonstration as being our basic tools. We need to know when to apply those. When do we need a vowel versus a consonant? When do we need to change the scale, and how do we demonstrate, and what instructions, and how should we instruct somebody? Understanding how somebody learns and then being able to adjust our teaching style accordingly is a really important part of teaching. If you've got a student who is very visual and you're teaching in a very auditory manner, then we're going to have problems. The student is not going to understand what you're trying to get them to do. So you might have to adjust your approach. You might be more visual, but you actually have to think about, how can I teach this in a more auditory way for this particular student? We also need to consider mindsets. A lot of beliefs and negative beliefs will get in the way of somebody practicing or learning or accepting constructive criticism. We need to know how to communicate effectively and how to give feedback that is supportive, but also helps that person move forward. We also need to know how to keep someone motivated, so they not only that they progress and they enjoy their lessons, but also as a business, we want our students coming back, because otherwise we're not getting paid. So motivation is really important. And we need to know how to deal with difficult students and parents. If you're working with kids, sometimes it's not the kid that's the problem, but it's actually the parent. And I'm sure many of you have heard of the personality of the stage parent, and they're very real, trust me. So how do you manage those? We also, of course, need to know, how do we apply all this technical stuff into song and performance? And how can we teach our students to practice in an effective way? It's not enough to just say, you need to practice more. We need to teach the student how to practice. And in BAST, we talk about deliberate practice strategies, where somebody slows it down, breaks it up, does repetition, gets feedback, etc. So that when the students by themselves, which most of the time they're working on their voice by themselves, they're with you just for a very short time, they're being effective and they're able to manage and understand what they should be listening out for, and how to give themselves feedback, and how to progress. And we also want to be able to help somebody develop their performance skills, because it's not enough to just sing. We need to be able to sing in front of an audience. We need to be able to move around the stage. We need to be able to interact with a band maybe. There's all sorts of different, depending on the type of singing that someone's doing, different components that need to be included. And are we able to help our students get that experience? Maybe we put on our own concerts, or we put a singer-songwriter night on, or maybe we encourage our students to all go out to a karaoke bar and, do some singing together. Of course, it's very important that we understand the health of the voice. So what are the potential vocal pathologies that a singing voice can incur, and how do we assess that? Now, we're not there to diagnose. It's not our role to say, oh, you've got nodules or this is a polyp, but we do need to know when what we're hearing, if we hear breathiness or hoarseness, or if the student's complaining about voice problems, we do need to know when is it appropriate to send them off and who do we send them to. So an ENT is obviously an appropriate starting point, ear, nose and throat surgeon, but we want not just any old ENT, we want someone who's got a laryngology background, someone who has spent extra time studying the larynx and the vocal folds. And if we're working, with people who are professional voice users, we need to make sure that we're advising them appropriately to go and get the appropriate care. Now, we can help with good vocal health care advice. That's pretty straightforward. You're not going to cause any damage. Most of the time it's about making sure that you're well rested, that you're well hydrated, that you're warming up before you sing and cooling down afterwards, and that you're maintaining a healthy nutritious diet and maintaining any other issues like, if you've got asthma or reflux or anything that might be impacting the voice, then managing that well so that it doesn't impede on the voice too much. We need to know how to prevent vocal injury. So what kind of vocal techniques or incorrect vocal technique will cause problems? And it might not be just to do with technique. It might be to do with use. Maybe they're overusing their voice. It might be shouting on the weekend, when they're going to the football match. Then they want to sing that night and their voice is conked out. It might be that they work in an environment which is got a lot of chemicals and that's drying out their voice or their vocal folds, and then they go and sing and now it's problematic. So understanding how to prevent injury. And then also we want to know how to manage someone when they've had injury or had some sort of voice issue or maybe an operation. How do we help manage getting them back to singing after they've done all their medical things and done the rehab? So understanding all that will really put you in good stead and help you feel very confident to manage any kind of singer. Other skills that we might be working on, if we haven't already got them, is basic keyboard skills, being able to play the scales, knowing how to play them in all the different keys. Could be a major scale, a triad, an arpeggio. There's an extended arpeggio that we teach in BAST, which I really like because it goes over an octave and it really helps stretch out the vocal ligament. And all the various variations of that. And it might be also that we get more complicated and go into things like chromatic scales or modal scales, just depending on the kind of music that you're involved in and what genre. Bit of music theory never goes astray. Just understanding chord structure, because if you understand chord structure and how to play the chords, you could look at a music chart and just read the chords and be able to accompany a student really simply, but it's very helpful. Also, we need to know how to teach vocal style. So if someone comes in and they're wanting to understand what they need to do with their voice, what kind of vocal qualities they need in order to belt, say for instance for musical theatre, then we need to understand how to teach that. And when is it appropriate and when isn't it appropriate? And how does a singer who wants to, find their own voice and their own brand and style, how do they develop that? We want to, help people if they're wanting to go down the artist route or the performer or working singer route, understand what's required. There's some auditioning songs that they need to put together. Do they need to be working on their songwriting maybe, or working on harmonies? So there's lots of different options out there in terms of what we can do as a singer. And we want to help our students understand how to do these things so they've got options. Some might be auditioning, whether it's for education or whether it's to get into a show. Might be showcasing, if they're trying to get signed. So how do we help the singer gain more confidence doing that? And how do they know what songs to choose and what parts of the songs they should be performing? And of course, if a student wants to go down the pathway of a singing career or into further education, then we need to have some idea of how to guide them and help them in that way. Nowadays, especially since the pandemic, there's a lot more teaching online happening. And so being able to deliver a lesson online and manage that and manage the lesson is also something that we should know. Obviously, it's great when someone comes into your studio and you've got them right in front of you, but it's not always possible. Maybe the public transport isn't working and so they can't get to you, or maybe they're on tour, or they're traveling, or maybe you're traveling. And so being able to teach on Zoom is really handy these days. You need to figure out, have you got the right equipment? Do you know how to safeguard and secure the lesson? And what kind of audio and mic settings do you need? How do you plan your lesson around that? Is it possible to accompany? Well, the short answer to that is no, you can't accompany at your end when the other person is singing, because obviously there's going to be that delay. I fully believe that at some point in time, technology will improve and we'll be able to play at the same time, but right now we can't do that. So how do you manage that? Most of the time, I get my students to play their accompaniment at their end, and then I just put up some hand signals to say, when I do this or when I do that, then you either stop or you keep going. So beyond teaching, thinking about who else can help, who else do you need to have on your referral list? So that'll be an ENT laryngologist, a speech and language therapist, maybe a laryngeal massage therapist, an osteo, chiropractor, physio, nutritionist, hypnotherapist, CBT, NLP, EFT, psychotherapy, acting, performing, songwriting, recording, production. You don't have to have all of those by any means, but having a referral list is really useful for the students. Say a student comes along and says, I'd really love to do some songwriting. Wouldn't it be great if you could then refer them to someone who will be able to help them do that, if you don't do that yourself already? And then, of course, thinking about understanding how to run a business. Maybe there's a course or some books you need to read. How, are you going to be a limited company or are you going to be self-employed? How are you going to manage your taxes? How are you going to market and advertise in order to build your client base? What do you need to do on social media? Which social media platform? I can tell you one thing, don't try to do it all. Just pick a platform, one that you feel comfortable on, and start there. Nowadays, I think probably for the majority, it's either Instagram, Facebook, or TikTok. But there are different limitations to each one of them. And so you have to figure out which is going to work for you the best. Are you going to build a website? How are you going to communicate? Do you have your own email that they, or a professional email, not professional, it's the wrong word, but a business email that people can email you on? How are you going to start building your list? That's an important thing for any business these days, is creating a process where you can actually start to collect people's emails. Now, you don't have to do anything with them in the beginning, especially if there's nothing going on. But if you've got someone's permission to email them, when you do have a service, when you're up and running, when you're starting to teach, when you've got a product, then if they've given you permission, that is so valuable these days. That is the gold of a business nowadays, is their list. Maybe you might think about doing a podcast. So BAST has a podcast. It's called Singing Teachers Talk. And it's one way that we know a lot of our customers come. So people who start to inquire about becoming a singing teacher may have first of all heard myself or Alexa or any of their guests that come on to the podcast. And that's how they got introduced to BAST Training. Also, are there some events you could be featured at, or doing some workshops at, or attending, to network. There's some products you could be putting together. Maybe there's a little course you could put together. It doesn't have to be about singing. It might be something related to singing or music production. Maybe it's a membership site that you can create, or maybe there's some other services you can add in. I don't want you to feel overwhelmed by all this. I just want you to be thinking about these things and starting to fill in the gaps. Where can you go and get that information? How can you get started? Who can help you? Of course, BAST Training is here, and I'm going to talk in my next video about all the things that we do at BAST Training that would be able to help you fill in all those gaps. Now, it might be that you've never done any teaching before and you're right at the beginning of that journey, or it might be that you've already been teaching and you've got some gaps, but BAST Training will be able to help you with that. We're not the only people, but obviously we'll be focusing on what we have to offer, because that's good business. Okay, so I'm hoping that you are joining us on our socials somewhere. We're at BAST Training. We have a Facebook group as well, Singing Teacher Community, which you can join for free. We sometimes do 5-day challenges, so be on the lookout for that and make sure you're getting onto our mailing list so that you can get information when we do free education, or if we do the 5-day challenge, or if we have special offers going on.